Good evening. My name is Daryl Amy, and I want to say thank you to everybody for being here tonight for what is going to be a very special evening. We're going to meet someone really, really cool who I'm going to introduce in just a few moments. All right. Tonight is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Dr. David Stuckenberg. David Stuckenberg is a global influencer, executive, strategist, entrepreneur, and inventor. He's been called a young disruptor by NATO's Allied Command for Transformation, the George Kennan of this century by senior defense leaders, and a national treasure by Ambassador James Woolsey, 16th Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Dr. Stuckenberg's executive experience spans government and industry from nuclear treaty compliance and national critical infrastructure to high-tech startups. He's frequently asked to speak at the White House, NATO, King's College, Citigroup, United States Special Operations Command, the National Academy of Public Administration, and Chatham House on strategic issues at the nexus of technology, innovation, and strategy. His research and ideas are known for their constructive dissonance, the ability to challenge the status quo while building global consensus and meaningful change. Dr. Stuckenberg's national infrastructure resilience strategies and implementation programs are benchmarked by the White House as an exemplar for U.S. states and cities, including the nation's largest federal complex. His groundbreaking work on strategic gray zone warfare and modern military theory have influenced leaders at all levels and are the digest of leaders worldwide, as featured in Harvard, King's College, UK Guardian, Bloomberg, Forbes, and other publications. While he was serving at the U.S. Department of State, Dr. Stuckenberg served as delegate to the United Nations, special committee member to the National Security Council, and subject matter expert and foreign affairs advisor. He is the architect of critical international peacekeeping programs that leverage early and advanced technologies to strengthen international ties and reduce risks to both peacekeepers and the populations they protect. As a strategist, he established and led Blue Ribbon Joint Chiefs of Staff Task Force, where he marshaled 150 organizations in groundbreaking research leading to a presidential executive order. His work now comprises a network of 400 public and private enterprises. And if that weren't enough, completing his postdoctoral research at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Dr. Stuckenberg's research on understanding the asymmetric use of water as an instrument of societal control and the development of emerging and federated supply-side water technologies has been highlighted by the U.S. government as transformative. Dr. Stuckenberg leads a research team of more than a dozen scientists and engineers to spread the advance of sustainable water technologies. He leads as a co-founder, chief operations officer, and vice chairman of the board at Genesis Systems, one of the world's most successful green water tech companies. And he previously served as CEO at Genesis. David has authored and co-authored 20 US and global patents. He continues in all of this to serve as an officer in the Air National Guard, where he directs strategy for his state. As a veteran US Air Force pilot, Stuckenberg has flown more than 150 combat missions and has been awarded the Air Medal and 6 Aerial Achievement Medals. David serves as a chairman of the board at the American Leadership and Policy Foundation and co-chairman at the FBI InfraGard National Water Security Working Group. He holds a PhD in International Affairs and Strategy from the King's College in London, a master's in politics from George Washington University, and best of all, a BS in technology from right here in our backyard, the University of Central Missouri. Will you join me in giving a great Arkansas welcome to my good friend, David Stuckenberg. Cool.
Hey, look, I made it up the stairs. That's great news. Thank you for being here tonight. And look, you don't have to believe all the lies he just told about me. You're here to kick the tires and get real and have a candid and frank conversation. And that's what I want to happen tonight. And I'd asked my brother who's with me to bring a tire so that as you come to kick the tires tonight, you can kick the tire instead of me. But I'll give you a crack at it. And It's really good to be here in the absolute heart of America, right in the heart of Arkansas in Faulkner County. And the namesake for Herschel Hall, where we are tonight, is incredible. Thank you, Chris, for having me, and thank you, Daryl, for getting this set up. And thank you, each one, for your time and for being here. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I want you to get to know who I am. I'm not going to have a lot of pretense because I don't believe in it. We need to be authentic with one another. We need to be truthful about where we're at. Our nation suffers from a lack of truth. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about your story, the part you don't know yet, maybe the part that you haven't been told, the part that maybe you've seen glimpses of, but there's more to it than meets the eye and you always knew it. And then I'm going to tell you about a future I think we can all get together on. And then I want to hear from you. I want to hear your ideas, your thoughts, because I'm considering making a pretty substantial move over the next few weeks to take down giants and to put practical, common sense governance at the heart of this country's White House, right? At the heart of this country's governance. One of us for all of us. But this movement, what we're calling Operation Dark Horse, a dark horse candidate is someone who is not expected to win, not expected to move at all, maybe even an unknown. But right now, dark horses are emerging from all over this republic. And in fact, a very unknown has just received the speakership of the U.S. House of Representatives, a dark horse candidate. Something's changing in politics. The American people have had enough. And we have decided to exert our authority and our opportunity as citizens. And now we have the opportunity to do that, a small window before 2024. So thank you for my family for being here. And I'm here. Come here, Dave. I told you could come up on stage. He asked me before I came up here. He said, hey, Dad, can I come up? So I told him I'd give him a chance. Yeah, that's my mini. That's Dave Stuckenberg Jr. Say hi to everybody.
Hi. Hi.
Okay, now go back to Mom. Okay. All right. So, what you're not going to see tonight, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm asking you just to give me the gift of your time and to listen, and then at the end, the gift of your wisdom and insight. Let me quickly tell you a little bit about my upbringing. I grew up in rural Osage County, Oklahoma. The situation was dire. I was raised by my mother in a single-parent home, and we had so little that I had to get a lot of food from food banks, and we ended up in very low-income housing, and at the end of the day, I think our rent once upon a time was $8 a month, because it was a type of housing where your rent is adjusted based on income. And but my family was not born into poverty necessarily. They had been successful business people. And so as I grew up, I watched my friends go into criminal activities, but I knew that entrepreneurship would be a way out, and it was. But still, there was hardship to deal with, and so by the time I was 8 years old, my mother took me out of school, and she said she was going to homeschool us, and she never did because she had other things going on, other challenges. And at 11, I entered the workforce, so I was a little younger than my middle son, who's 12. Entering the workforce was an interesting challenge for somebody so young. She used to spread out bills in front of me at a local pizza parlor and say, today or this week you need to go out and make $500 or we're going to be evicted. And these are the challenges that I had to deal with. And it's okay, because it forged me, and it taught me that grit and patience and trust in God can bring you through just about anything. By the time I was 19, I had a true heart for humanity. I wanted to help people because I had seen people help me and I had seen them turn aside. Imagine going to a food bank and you've gone there so many times that they say, no more. I've experienced that. And so by the time I was 22, I came to the end of a long childhood of difficulty, but I was successful in business. And my dad was an artist for presidents, and when he left home, he left behind little drawings, little pen and ink drawings, and I would go all over the United States showing those little drawings, and to all the little towns here in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado. And I would meet people like you, hundreds of them. The first year I was selling out on the road, my brother Will over there on the end, he drove for me because I wasn't old enough to drive. But I was good at showing people, and they loved the art. The printer in Tulsa, Oklahoma sent us a little letter, and it said, "Thanks for the hard work, Stuckenberg boys. You've done a really good job. You placed 160,000 pieces of art in just 8 months." And that went on year after year after year until I was 22 years old, and I felt a calling to do something more. I felt a calling to go and serve this nation and to serve people around the world. And so originally I thought I was going to go to some distant land serving in humanitarian capacity. I had just returned from Vietnam, and the folks I went to Vietnam with, Vietnam was my first exposure to communism, true communism, what oppression looks like. Have you ever been so oppressed that you can cut the air with a knife? That's what it was like being there, because there was a force, there was something dark over that nation. And I got to feel that, and I got to meet the people who are suffering under that. And it meant a lot to me, and it impacted me, and I wanted to serve them more. So I came home, it was 9/11, I had a meeting with the head of that ministry, and the Twin Towers fell, and the meeting was canceled. And from that point on, my life went in another direction. I think it was the course was altered. So one day when I was 22 years old, about a year after 9/11, I'd finished my pilot license. I went into the Air Force recruiter in Springfield, Missouri, met with Sergeant Dave Manicky, and I said, "I'd like to enlist." And he said, "Well, you and everybody else, what have you got?" And I said, "Well, just a willingness to serve." And he said, "Well, I can't take you. You don't have any education." And so I left disappointed but determined, and I came back in 6 weeks, and I put down my GED, and I said, "What about now?" And he said, "That looks pretty good." So that was how I enlisted in the Air Force back in 2003. And it wasn't very long before busting wrenches up at Whiteman Air Force Base, not far from Kansas City, in very cold weather, that I decided maybe there was another career path that would be better. But before I did, my leadership came to me and they said, "Hey, would you be interested in becoming an officer?" And of course, I said, "Well, what's that entail?" They said, "You can fly these beautiful aircraft." "All right," I said, "but I don't want to fly the fighter ones. I don't want to fly anything that's shooting." And they said, "Okay, well, we can sort all that out later." So I commissioned, I got through college. My wife was a great help to me. She tutored me through. I had a lot of ground to make up, right? Struggled. But I ended up completing with a very good GPA. But I want to take you back just a minute before I move forward in my career and what got me here in front of you today to listen and hear. The thousands of people that I met over the years that I showed art, who gave time and who gave generously to someone they didn't know, taught me something about this country, the preciousness and the kindness of the people here. And so I'll give you one story that represents all of them, because I've been all over these states, as I've said. But this one moment made a difference. And I was in Clinton, Missouri, in the courthouse. And I don't know the name of the judge anymore. It was a long time ago. But he had all of this art spread out in his chambers. And he said, "Dave, today I'm going to buy some of this, but I want you to know the real investment I'm making in is you." And it took me across the totality of what I had experienced growing up, and I realized there's something fundamentally good here. There's something worth preserving. And the other day I was on a phone call with a minister from Israel, and he said, "Dave, do you know what really inspires people to want to come to America? It's the goodness, the gentleness, the kindness, the meekness, the love for one another. So we're in this time where all of these things have gone by the wayside, but they're still here. They're in you. They're in you, and they're in me. But why aren't we seeing them in the public arena? And what's wrong? And so that's the conversation I want to have with you today. So I want to fast forward back to that conversation with Sergeant Maneke at the recruiter's office. I went in the Air Force, I went through pilot training, and I struggled because I was a non-traditional student. I had a family, and I hadn't been through all the math, but I was determined, and I successfully finished that training. And on selection night, they had a big screen just like this one, and they would pop up your name and the aircraft you were going to go fly. And I just wanted the biggest aircraft that there was. It was called a C-5 Galaxy. It could carry more water and more food than any other airplane in the inventory. That was the one I asked for. Instead, the screen popped up, and on the screen, there was a special operations aircraft used for surveillance and reconnaissance, and my heart sunk. And I knew I was going to the front of the fight. And everyone around in that room knew they were going to the front of the fight too. And I kind of tried to steel myself because I was an officer. I was trained to maintain military bearing no matter what happened, even though I'd been socked in the gut. And I went to the back of the room, and Shannon met with me. And my flight mates came over who had been going through training with me, and they knew that it was the worst job in the military at that time. It was the height of the war on terror, and they knew that I was going to see action, and they knew I was going to see the horrors of war, and so did I. It was like drawing the worst lot that you could. And so for the next 5 years, I went through a very challenging time, and I defended the frontiers of this country from the worst of humanity. And I'm not even going to say that I'm proud of that time. I'm going to say that I'm proud of the people that I served with. And those of you who are veterans here, you know what I'm talking about. And you form a special bond and a special commitment to this country that nothing can ever separate you from your devotion and your willingness to die for the Constitution of the United States, which is a beautiful document. And today, there are powers and forces at work in this country which view that document as a hindrance to an agenda. They view that document as something that needs to be stepped on and torn up rather than safeguarded and protected. And there's a rift that has developed in this nation. And so fast forwarding, I would come through that time in my life. I would go into many other jobs and fields, but along the way I would discover things. I would begin working in the nuclear community. I would discover incredible threats to the United States that exist because of our technology, our advancements, holes in our armor that evil could exploit. And that was my mission, finding the things that no one else found. Looking in the folds and in the corners where no one else was looking, and finding how our enemies could defeat us. And for almost a decade, I lectured across NATO, and I spoke to generals, and I spoke to senior leaders, and I said, we have to protect the United States. The name of my briefing was A Theory of Defeat, because when the Air Force encouraged me to get a doctorate degree, it wasn't so I could get letters behind my name. It was so I could prove a hypothesis. And that hypothesis was that the United States can be defeated at the time and place of our enemy's choosing. That hypothesis was proven. And so, through 5,000 hours of war game and the participation of more than 360 people across 150 agencies and organizations, and 2 years working on a task force called the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force. These people worked tirelessly to prove not only did the vulnerability exist, but they toiled on how to correct it. And then one day, the answer came to me in a still small voice. It wasn't the think tanks working on it. It wasn't the groups thinking on it. It was inspiration. That same kind of inspiration created the Constitution of the United States. That same kind of inspiration created a document that exists today as a miracle. And it still exists if we can keep it, right? Coming out of the Constitutional Convention, what did Benjamin Franklin say? You have yourself a republic if you can keep it. That's the question I put to you tonight. Can you keep it? Are you interested in keeping it? I believe you are. Because if I've met one of you, I've met all of us. And we have all been told we're nobodies. I've been told I was a nobody my whole life. I'll give you an example. It was 2015. I'm working millions of dollars in programs at MacDill Air Force Base as one of the chiefs of the plans and program shop. I had more than 39 programs I was responsible for. Those programs were behind from 5 to 8 years. Within 1 year, they were on time, corrected. And even the alternate Pentagon, which is called the National Airborne Operations Center, had its operations envelope expanded because the order had been sitting, waiting to be accomplished for more than 3 years. I'm sorry, almost 8 years, and it was corrected in 1. So all of this is going on. And I discovered that we can put things back that are out of order. We can put things back that are disjointed. It just takes dedication and someone who's willing to work across the aisle with people that disagree with them. Someone who is a unifier rather than a divider. As we move forward to the events that took me to Washington, D.C., I experienced initial enthusiasm and then an immediate backlash of corruption in that city as a uniformed officer. The city came after me viscerally and tried to destroy my career because I represented the right things. There are two kinds of people that go to Washington. Those who take their values and the city says, not here, and spits them out, or those who go and they're subsumed by what that city represents. It's the pinnacle of corruption. It is Rome. But in spite of that, we have some challenges, and our adversaries have begun to form an alliance against us. I'm sure you're watching this unfold day to day in the media. China is at the center of it, and they view themselves at the center of a new world order. If you go back in history to around the 1600s, there was a treaty that ended a 30 years war called the Treaty of Westphal. And that is currently the basis for the rules-based order, where we do not assassinate each other's state representatives, such as ambassadors. We don't carry out incursions into other lands and sovereign territories. We're not supposed to. It gave us things like freedom of navigation of the seas, right? These are the rules of our international order. And China is seeking to take that poster and tear it off the wall. And behind that poster is a red star, and that red star represents communism and a new world order. And communism is something I again experienced as a young man, and it made a profound impression on me. But it also made a profound impression because growing up, I knew a man named Richard Wurmbrand who had suffered in communist prisons. He was a pastor in Romania. And as a pastor, the communists wanted to use him as a tool. They wanted access to his network, a commitment of solidarity and loyalty to the Communist Party would give them control over his congregation. And so they said, you sign here and you'll go free. And if not, the beatings will continue. And so for 14 years, he held out until he was purchased from prison in 1953. He wrote a book called Tortured for Christ. You can look it up. When he came back to the United States, he stood before one of the committees in the U.S. Congress. And he took his shirt off, the only man ever to do that. And he showed them the scars where he'd been beaten. But it wasn't for self-aggrandizement or for his own glory. It was to share a lesson, and this was the lesson. America is the last bastion of freedom. And if you fall to communism, the world will fall. And right now, we have socialist currents moving in our society, which is a precursor to communist takeover. And China has its sights set on the United States of America. They have their sights set on our allies and partners. And we, this very moment, are in an undeclared war. That war is moving the United States over and allowing China to take essentially the new role as the dominant global leader. This cannot be allowed to happen. And right now, there are candidates who are making their way across Iowa and other early states who actually believe that places like Taiwan need to be allowed to be taken over, and other territories aggressively need to be abandoned. Let China do what they want, they say. This is not the American way. It's not the way of freedom. This election in 2024 is vital because you, the American people, are on the horns of a dilemma, and many Americans don't know about it. Most of you do because you're paying attention. And because you're paying attention, you understand that nobody who is currently running for office is the answer. So here's the dilemma, and then we're going to talk about it. On this hand, we have extraordinary actors, both state and non-state, who are looking to revise the present world order, and they're beginning to unify. Do you see them galvanizing around the Middle East? They're supporting each other in their mischief. Evil is always drawn to evil. And on this hand, they're working internally in the United States to undermine our confidence in the Constitution and in our republic. They want us to be at war with one another rather than standing in solidarity against the evil that is coming our way. They're seeking to divide us. They're amplifying messages that tell us, don't trust. Everything is broken. Abandon all hope. Move toward revolution. Take up arms against your republic. These are the messages, and they're wrong. They're designed to break us. They're designed to bring revolution, because I'm going to tell you the one thing that strife does. It allows your enemies to overcome you. The United States of America right now needs to be united. We have to be united. And that is going to take somebody who can bind up the wounds and heal broken hearts, and who can lead by example, and who is not going to magnify the rifts and the fissures between us. We have to pull in close. It was once said by someone more brilliant than I, we had surely better hang together or we'll hang separately. And I think Reagan got it right, but I think his timing was wrong. He said, we are at a time for choosing. You and I are at a time for choosing. But that time is now. I believe in 2024, if we fail to elect the right president, that we're going to have challenges that we can no longer overcome as a republic. However, if we can elect one of us for all of us, someone like us who understands what it's like to feel it because inflation has run away, who understands what it's like because taxes are too much, who understands and who is insulted at the fact that White House press briefings happen every day and they insult our intelligence and lie to us about the state of immigration and other key critical national issues. These things have to be addressed, and it will take somebody with integrity to form a turnaround team for this country. A turnaround team typically goes into a company when it is failing, okay? Our Constitution is not failing us. Our leadership is failing us. They have the wrong material. And I'm not going to sit idly by on the edge as our country is run over the cliff. And I believe it's going to take a certain kind of leadership and determination to form a turnaround team who are America's Avengers. They are people with extraordinary talents who are not married to talking points, who are not married to political positions, but they're going to go forward and make a stand, bold stand, with new ideas, and work to solve problems rather than suggest edits. Okay? When's the last time we actually solved anything? And so now we're dying this death by 1,000 cuts. And it doesn't have to be that way. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. For immigration, for example, there are more than 10 million illegal immigrants estimated to be in the United States right now. We can solve it in 3 steps. Ready? Here we go. Step 1, we're going to send federal troops to the north and south borders and make that part of a homeland defense mission. I don't know one patriot or American who wouldn't be proud to stand on the walls of our country and say, you're not coming in, because this is our sacred homeland. Once we do that, we stop the bleeding, we stop the hemorrhaging, and we begin to take back control of our own borders. Step 2, we're going to allow a 60-day period where people can come out of the shadows who have been hiding, who have been manipulated, who have been controlled, who are part of trafficking, and we need 2 things out of them. We need to know who they are, so we can do a background check and make sure they're not a threat to us. And number 2, we need to make sure that they are healthy and not spreading communicable diseases, okay? Now that we know who they are, and they know that they don't have to fear us, we're going to give them an opportunity to do what they wanted to do, and that was to join the greatest nation that has ever been, the United States of America. Now, what happens when we do these kinds of solutions? Do we get everybody on board? Probably not. It's once been said, perfect is the enemy of good enough. But what we are able to do is get to about a 95% solution that deprives horrible people of human beings that they need for inventory and slaves, okay? Because we know who they are now. And I believe that's what a city set on a hill will do. Furthermore, we stop the flow of drugs over our borders that's killing young and old alike, okay? It's very important that we get a handle on that. We also get to add 10 million workers to our tax base at a time when we have a massive government deficit, and we need to increase tax income, but not by raising your taxes, because yours are coming down. Because lowering taxes is the fuel for an economy that is charged with growth. So these are some of the things I'm talking about. I framed out a little bit about who I am. I framed what the challenges are that we face, both externally and internally. And now I've talked to you a little bit about the future. But let me finish with this, and then I want to take your questions. We have a window, and it's fading fast. Right now, we had better hang together. And if you want an opportunity to bring a candidate who is humble, credible, and who gets results, I would suggest that I might be that candidate. And so I want to have a conversation with you, because if I'm not, then I'd like to go back home, because this is a painful process. But if I am, I want to know it, and I want to know why, because your opinion matters. Us nobodies, there's nobody like us. That's what I've learned. All right.
That's good. All right, well, come on up. Yeah, have a seat. We wanted to make this evening very, very conversational, and as you can tell, as David is beginning this amazing journey, it's very valuable for him to be here and to just be able to hear from us. And so we're just going to have an open conversation. Any question, nothing's out of bounds.
Nothing's out of bounds.
This is a man who will engage.
Let's be real. All right, we've had enough of the phony. All right, kick the tires, guys. There's one down there. I'm just kidding.
Step right up, yeah, or shout it out. Either way is fine.
What would you do about Ukraine?
Great question, and a tough one. So let's take a little history lesson. Russia has always been a very difficult nation to defend, and it has looked at the territories on its borderlands as part of a buffer. China has its Great Walls, and Russia has its boundary states. Some of them were all old Warsaw Pact states, part of the Cold War Iron Curtain. And so this territory in Ukraine is viewed by Russia as part of its wall. And so, to some degree, they are somewhat happy with the progress that they have made in certain regions, and they've taken many, 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 many miles of land. And they would probably be happy with the status quo. But this is going to be a fight that Ukraine fights and Russia fights to the bitter end. It could even represent something similar to our Afghanistan. So then the question becomes, so what? What's that mean to America? Number one, it is important to stand in solidarity with nations that are democracies, because the nations that are communist and socialist and even tyrannical, they stand in solidarity. The challenge becomes, where do we go? And America has to set some limits. We can never commit forces to Ukraine's fight, okay? We can commit resources. But what we have increasingly seen is it's a very corrupt government. That corrupt government has to have better accountability for the resources that we're giving them, because America cannot give to a cause indefinitely, especially when there's abuse of those resources. So my short answer would be, we continue in a supporting role, but here's what's happening. All of these disparate little flashpoints around the world, they're beginning to connect together. So now you see China starting to sell Russia weapons because they're running low on ammunition. So what's actually happening is that this is sort of developing into a proxy war, and it could become another flashpoint. I really think the way forward is to take membership right now of Ukraine off the table for NATO. And this was really what caused the flashpoint. As Ukraine drew closer to NATO membership, that's when Russia moved. And so if we can take that off the table until things cool down, that would probably be in everyone's best interest. But I think that from a territorial standpoint, we need to support their defenses. I hope that answers your question. I'd like to hear from my veteran friends. Now, let me get you a mic.
Yeah.
What are you going to do for your soldiers that are now veterans now that are suffering from sickness from wars in Iraq and catastrophic wounds now that, I don't know if you know what the PACT Act is. I'm affected by it, and I'm losing my benefits. There's many more of us like this. We have an issue where we're coming down with stage 4 cancer, okay? And we lost our service group life insurance policies. It sucks. That needs to be repaired. Regardless of any kind, America needs to take back and take care of their soldiers that went out and fought for everybody during where's all those 9/11 people at? You know, we went out and did our jobs, and we did them we were professionals. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And not even our Social Security, I'm only getting half of my Social Security. It's been over a year now. I have a terminal letter. I was supposed to already be dead in July and August, and I just come down with this a week before last November on Thanksgiving. I went from 173 pounds down to 130 in less than 2.5 weeks. I have full-blown stage cholangiocarcinoma, which is rare. That doesn't belong in my race. It actually belongs to an Asian cancer, and it doesn't start until like usually 70 or 75 years old. There is no cure. My family have nothing on my passing. And in order for me to get any kind of cancer insurance, you know how much that costs? And you got to stay alive for over 2 years, and they give you a life expectancy of 6 months. That's not right. I brought another fellow of mine, soldier right here, who was with me, and we both got EFP attacks, Katyusha rockets filled with non-depleting radiant rounds. We are sick. I have everything coming from China, Iran. I have pictures to prove it. This stuff's been way long ago and is actually dated all the way back in 2000. Operation Desert Spring, nobody knows that. It was hailed.
I hear you.
And wait till you go to Kansas. It's going to get worse. Because all these guys are now just getting tested. It was never out there for us until they put a deadline on it and come out of the news. That's what I want to know what's going to happen next, because those are the people who are going to back you up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing your personal story and being vulnerable, because we need to get real with one another. When I was working at the Pentagon, it was during COVID, the whole place emptied out. But I put on my uniform and I went to work every day because I wondered who was standing watch. And if you've ever seen the movie Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, he said, as he arrived at his post for the first time, I arrived at Fort Sedgwick to find it abandoned and in disrepair. And he said, I've appointed myself to cleanup duty. And by God, I'm appointing myself to cleanup duty for the government of the United States on behalf of our military fighters, the most courageous generation before the greatest generation that, like the Vietnam veterans, have been tossed into the corner and set aside. And I sympathize with you, and I'm hearing the stories. And to be honest with you, the Veterans Administration has been broken for a long, long time. When my wife and when I was in grad school, I had the chance to go to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and I had a chance to research my ancestors. These were folks who fought in Gettysburg. They fought at Antietam. They were patriots. They kept this republic together. We just said the Pledge of Allegiance. We said indivisible. That's what that means. Are we divisible? We can't be. And so, in walking in some quiet time at Arlington across the street from the Pentagon during the COVID, I walked on the rows of graves and I began to realize the most interesting thing. Chiseled on the headstones were the dates that those patriots had gone out. And they were generally buried in sections by a year. And so I found myself in the section 1981, I'm 42, 79, 80, 81. It was the section of the generation that you and I are replacing. And I wondered if we would do them honor. If their sacrifice and their service would continue beyond our generation, if we would be up to the task. There is a major issue of age, I think, present in this election. We need someone with the stamina, the courage, and a record to fight every day for long hours, tirelessly, for people like you, because you fought for us. We're going to fix that, and you're going to go to the front of the line. That's my answer. Other questions? Back of the room.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming and stepping up.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Pretty awesome.
Tell us your name.
Sean Faison.
Okay.
I'm from Conway, owner of G6 Security. Quick question. I have several questions. I was going to ask one. I want to hog the time up, right? Hog time. But are you going to run as an independent or a Republican?
Good question. I'm going to run as a Republican. Although I highly respect all political persuasions, for 20 and a half years of my life, I have worked with people across the aisle to get the mission done. And it's always the mission that matters. However, as someone who grew up in the Midwest, I'm a conservative. And I'm dyed-in-the-wool Republican. But our party has become something that I think we'd like to see turn around. We'd like to see it represent more. We'd like to see the ideals that we live every day in our life more well represented. And I think that time has come. So that's why I'm here to listen to you. because I think none of the candidates presently in the race represent anything new. It's a continuation of the same. And you know what they say about same, and expecting to get a different result. So I think that it's time that we, the people, rise up and say, not your man, ours, one of us. More questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I guess my question is a little different than some of the ones that have been asked. And you've talked about how you plan to work across the aisle to bring the divide together.
Yes, ma'am.
With the younger generation, those who have the ability to vote, a lot of them have been in these educational systems that, in my opinion, have quite frankly brainwashed and taken their ability to have logic away. So if they were sitting here right now, they would probably not be hearing and not be cheering for what you're representing, in the sense of they're thinking about racism and diversity and getting caught up in all these other issues that are creating divides in our country.
You're right.
So how do you plan to address that as you're campaigning?
I am really glad you asked. I am so excited about that question. You can see on the front row, I have 5 of my own children, and they're out here with dad and mom because they're learning how we do democracy and how democracy should be done. This is it, right here. We're doing it in this room. It's not handed down from on high. It has nothing to do with special interest groups or big pots of money. It has to do with honest conversations like this. We are losing an entire generation. And you are exactly right. They are being brainwashed, and in particular, because they are susceptible to ideas. The children of this country are not merchandise that is available for someone to steal. They are the next generation of leaders, of firemen, of soldiers, of cameramen, of doormen, of woodworkers, of salesmen. And they need to be taught that they matter. And so, if the American people will support the idea, the President of the United States is going to begin mentoring them from the Oval Office on a weekly basis in every school in the United States. And not only that, he's going to model for them what behavior should be, what unity looks like, what civility looks like, what respect looks like. He's going to talk to them about how important it is that they prepare to take their role in the next generation. As young scholars, we are being outpaced and outgunned by our competitors, okay? We're not doing that great, but we can, because the intellectual power of creativity is free in a society like ours, and it has to be amplified. The children of the United States and the youth have to understand that conformity is not a virtue, that disruptive thinking, that original thinking and innovation represent the American way. The Constitution was an amalgamation of ideas that had never been tried before, and it worked marvelously. It was an innovation. So that's my answer. You in the back again. Yes, sir. Tell me your name again.
I'm sorry, I'm Mike Phillips.
Mike.
So you're going to run as a Republican, and it's October. Iowa caucus is in January 15th. How do you plan on making it happen?
Great question. All right, are you ready? This is your mission, should you choose to accept. The name of this campaign is Operation Dark Horse. And this is going to run on mission-type orders. Here's how it works. Come here, Daryl. Daryl, do you believe in the key components of this campaign? You can disagree with me on one or two, but do you agree with me on the key themes?
We're not getting married, are we?
No.
Okay. I do.
You do? Okay.
I do.
Okay. All right. Here are the objectives I need you to complete. In the next 25 days, I need you to talk to 2 people and share the things I've shared with each of you here today. And I need them to understand at the heart level that we have a decision to make as a republic. Okay?
Yep. That's good.
Now, this is called mission type orders. Daryl, move out.
Yes, sir.
Okay? I've just empowered him to run a part of my campaign. Before walking in here, I was on a conference call with 40 people across the United States, and I did the same thing. This is called grassroots. This is called truth. This is called peer-to-peer. You call 2 people and you tell them, I saw something extraordinary. It's not fake, it's real. I was there. This is somebody I think we should get behind. Make phone calls, get volunteers, donate, and we're going to run this campaign for almost no money, because it doesn't take billions of dollars for you to see what is right. It just takes a phone call from each one of you to someone else who is interested in right. This comes down to us. We're about to break the machine. We're about to take rocks and throw it in the gears. And all the political playbooks, we're going to burn them. Because that's how America does it. Sir, in the back.
Have you already filed for the next state? No.
Yes, I have filed for federal candidacy as of last Friday. And I'm on the New Hampshire primary ballot, moving on to South Carolina, Alabama, and so forth. And our intent is to complete and compete all 50 state primaries. There is still time. Never early, never late, always on time. Help is on the way, and we're going to help ourselves by helping each other. That's how this is going to work. This is called Operation Dark Horse. Next question.
I think that there are a ton of people talking about reaching across the aisle, because I think we have too big of an issue in our country where we think that we are Republicans or Democrats instead of Americans.
Yeah,
and I don't think that a donkey or an elephant is going to save this country. And I think that if we want to get back to where we used to be, we've got to figure out a way to work together.
That's right.
How in the world are you going to accomplish that in one of the most corrupt places in the world?
Good question. Great question. I want to be sitting in that seat. We'll have you up here.
Oh, no.
So, trust me, I've thought about it. So what happens in a corporation that is failing? You're failing to meet sales. Your team is falling apart. Maybe your staffing is falling apart. It's no longer performing at all. So you have to bring a team in that says, these are the priorities to survive the company, right? And right now we have some priorities to survive our republic. And I'm getting real authentic here and staying very vulnerable, because you need truth. And I'm just going to speak truth, okay? I am pro-life. I believe in the sanctity of life. I have 5 children. I grew up in a home where my mother was haunted by the lives she took in abortion. But if you have a sincerely held belief that is not the same as mine, come here. Just for example, and you're even wearing blue. How about that?
I planned that.
Can we agree that we cannot any longer compromise our national security?
Sure.
Can we agree that we want our government to function, to put less burden on you in terms of taxes and regulation? Can we agree on that?
Sure.
Then let's do this.
I'm not in Washington.
You're going to support me.
Okay,
I'm going to do it for you. All right.
Fair enough.
All right. So this is how it's done. We do not have to be aligned on 100% of the issues. We just need to get together on the main things, right? You may not agree about the way the neighbor cuts his grass, but that doesn't mean you need to go to war with him. But that's the message that's going around. He cuts hash marks. No, sir. We're better than that. And we're going to start demonstrating that kind of leadership and that kind of character as a nation. More questions. These are good. Yes, sir. Tell me your name.
Jonathan Coates.
All right, Jonathan.
Greenbrier. How has the Holy Spirit led your decision-making process?
So you're asking me a question of my deeply held faith, and I know why you've got me on the spot, because you're wondering if I'll compromise, and I won't. I will tell you that when I was 16, I became a Christian by accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, and He's the only reason I'm here. I am imperfect, and I am definitely not a know-it-all. But His love covers a multitude of sins, and I believe that the values in our Christian faith represent the bedrock of this nation, and they're not up for negotiation.
David, obviously a couple weeks ago, terrorists invaded Israel, and I'm just curious your perspective on that. Also, I noticed Mitch McConnell was on Sunday morning talk shows inferring that the United States would get involved with Iran. What is your perspective on the situation in the Middle East, and what would you do given the current circumstances?
Oh my, he's just asked me to solve world peace.
Softball.
Okay, that was not a softball, but I'll take it.
I want to know.
These are the questions that we are facing. Look, if we don't solve this, it's your children, your grandchildren, and our sons and daughters that go to die to fight these wars. We need to figure it out. These things matter. So right now we have a self-appointed terrorist group that has taken control of an entire segment of population estimated to be between 2 and 3 million people in the Gaza Strip, attack relentlessly with evil a sovereign nation. We've all seen it. There's no fake news here. It was unadulterated murder. Kill, steal, and destroy. And its intent was to harm. It has to be rooted out, no matter the cost. Okay? When the U.S. made its worst foreign policy decision in the history of the country by withdrawing from Afghanistan, I was on a panel with Ambassador Crocker, who was the ambassador to Afghanistan for a period of time. And I went on the record as saying this was the worst foreign policy mistake that the United States had made. And I still believe that. I hold that firm. Because rather than spending $150 million, $20 million a year continuing to stabilize Afghanistan with a few men dedicated on the frontiers to keep that nation stable, what ended up happening is our withdrawal emboldened an entire generation of people who are arrayed against the values of this republic and our allies. And now they have begun to form federations, even declare jihad. So there's nothing new under the sun, it's been said, and this is more of the same. And the longer Israel waits to go into Gaza, and the longer we restrain them, the more there's going to be loss of life in the Israeli Defense Forces. These are the practical matters on the field. They are laying mines and booby traps and IEDs for the brave men and women who will go in there and clean that out. They need to move now, and we need to give them full support. And if we need to send another carrier strike group, then we need to do that. But Israel's our close ally, and we have to have unflinching support for Israel as they defend themselves from this heinous attack. How to solve it in the long term? That's a hard question. It's going to depend on how the campaign turns out. Are they successful on the ground in ridding terrorist elements, or do they continue to do hit and run tactics like we've seen in so many guerrilla wars? I think the long-term outcome will probably end up looking like an occupation, which is not acceptable to many of the Middle East states. And but that's the reality on the ground, and that's going to be driven by outcomes. Iran, that's a tougher nut to crack. There is absolutely no way on this God's green earth that they need to be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. That's my viewpoint on that. Uncompromisingly absolutely a red line that cannot be crossed. You, sir.
I agree with your foreign policy. That's easy. But I own small businesses that are highly regulated. I own gun stores, trucking business, and the tax burden for small businesses is unbelievable. I mean, I have several friends that the entry, they don't last. They come to small business, they start stuff, they can't make it. And we've been blessed by God. I mean, that's the only reason we're at where we're at because of that. As far as I know, Daryl's a small business too. There's different business owners in the room. What's, I guess, economic policy? Because right now, I mean, I see we're a horrible place. I feel like Jimmy Carter Part 2 here.
Oh boy.
I just built a house and got a house loan this last week and I puked and I saw my number.
It is more expensive to buy a home than it has ever been in U.S. history. That is the recent headline. Than it has ever been. You'd be better off renting. And I think others enjoy the fruit of your labor, right, when you rent. And so ultimately, home ownership is part of the American dream. Small businesses comprise 60% of our economy. They are the engine of economy. That innovation I spoke about a minute ago, that allows us to keep our leading edge in the world. And I started a small business, after I came back from Afghanistan in 2016 with my wife. And that business has been through the ups and downs of the economic cycle. Right now it's going through a whiplash from the loss of research and development tax credits. But more than anything, I think during the Biden administration, we really felt the pinch of taxes just begin to choke out our growth, our ability to hire and expand, and certainly in our personal finances, right? We're, to be quite honest with you, we're feeling it, and it hurts. And I'm a little old-fashioned when it comes to the economy. This one's not hard to figure out. I'm going to give you more of your money. And guess what? When I give you more of your money back, when I reduce your taxes and the regulatory burden on your businesses, you're going to work harder. Our GDP is going to increase, and it's going to offset any loss of revenue from taxes. Not to mention, I'm going to add 10 million people to the tax base, who a lot of them are very hardworking, and they're going to pay their fair share. So those are two simple things. I'm going to reduce regulation across the board. If it can be pushed to the state level, we're going to do it. Let the states figure this out. That's what they're meant to do. We're a federation, okay? And reduce your taxes. Real simple. Took a minute, okay? Here's a story from Ronald Reagan's time. There was a woman who came to the White House back when you could come up and knock on the door. And one of the Secret Service agents told Reagan, there's a woman here, she's lost her job because of your tax cuts. It's that, they haven't trickled up, the benefits into the economy as quickly as they'd hoped. And her company laid off. She came in and told Reagan her story, and he said, I know it takes a minute for this to work, but give it time, trust me. The invisible hand that is working in the economy will create health and growth when you reduce taxes. It happens every single time. And we're in this boom and bust. So he says, listen, until it helps you, let me write you a personal check. So he wrote her a personal check for $1,000. Month goes by, she doesn't cash it. Secret Service, he says, hey, reach out to her, figure out where she is, bring her back in. He brought her back in, and this is one of the historians telling the story. And he said, ma'am, why didn't you cash the check? She said, well, I framed it. He says, okay. Wait, here's another one. Please cash this one. Okay. There was a man once in the White House who was in touch with you and I. And it's been a minute. We can go back and we remember those days where we could hold our head high to say the Pledge of Allegiance and we didn't have to apologize because we know what it is to be part of the United States of America, the greatest country on earth. I want to take us back there. This is not imagined. This is real. This opportunity right here and now exists over the next 120 days, and we can do this. And that not everybody will go with us, but I believe that those who are with us are more than those who are against us, and that's all we need to do. So here's the reality. your country is getting ready to get overcome. Let me put this in perspective for you. Right now, China is adding every 10 months tonnage to their Navy equivalent of the entire British fleet. By 2025, their Army, their Air Force, and their Navy will outgun us, and we will require the next 4 allies to even match their power. That's how fast they are building. We have a massive manpower deficit within our military, and we're going to have to address it. Part of that deficit is because of a culture problem, and that culture problem is that rather than having the military continue to be a place where you earn rank and you advance based on your talent, it has turned into almost an affirmative action type culture, where they're advancing people based on what they look like or other features that have nothing to do with performance. That is a poisonous and toxic culture, and it has to be rooted out. We have some things that need to get done. We have some walls to build. We have some infrastructure to lay down. Our water infrastructure across the United States is failing drastically. Within the next 30 years, much of the United States is going to run out of water. And you can actually see what this looks like from a satellite. If you want to go Google it, you can look from the Jet Propulsion Lab. It's called GRACE. It's the Gravity Research and Climate Experiment. And GRACE shows what the withdrawal of water from all of our underground aquifers looks like across the United States as the gravitational field changes. So we're going to have some people to build things. We're going to have some folks for projects. The Eisenhower Interstate System is a great example of putting people to work in meaningful projects, right? I want to take us, speaking of the Eisenhower system of highways, I want to take us from a place where I once sat in a meeting at US Northcom, and it was such a heavy-hearted meeting because we had to acknowledge how bad things truly were. We believe, as the United States of America, that we're invulnerable, impenetrable, but we learned on 9/11 we can be hit. But the hit that is possible to hit us with is much more significant than that, and is more painful, more destructive, and it can even be one that we don't get back up from, and I'm not talking about nuclear weapons. So, in that meeting, these challenges were acknowledged. They're the same challenges that I worked on in 2019 and 2018, and they're now part of unclassified research that is the most accessed and read research in the history of the Air Force's university. You can go look at them. The program was called the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force. A task force is stood up to achieve an objective. During the conversations surrounding that task force, I'll never forget that the vice commander of US Northcom, that is the combatant command in charge of protecting North America, he leaned back in his seat, folded his arms and said, "Well, at least we have good roads. We can do better than that for you, and we have to. Our opportunity to turn this around is slipping away, and that's why everyone under my voice, should you think that this is a worthy effort, has to become part of Operation Dark Horse." And let me leave you with my final thought before I let you
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes,
David?
sir. Go ahead.
In the back here, Joshua.
Yes, sir, Josh.
You're going to become the commander-in-chief. How are you going to stay grounded in your heart and who you are, and stay the man that you are in the process of stepping into a world that opposes that man and doesn't want him to succeed, and also be grounded and carry your family through that?
Thanks for the question. What a good one. They say, power corrupts. It does, doesn't it? But it starts with surrounding yourself with good people. For me, one of them is sitting right here in the front row. This is my wife, Shannon, and she is a rock and my biggest champion. And she is never hesitating to sweep the legs out from under me if I get a high head. Okay? But the other way is right here. You ready? Because I would die for my faith. Because it died for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me leave you with a story, the final one, true story. Everything I've told you here is truth. It's not political, is it? Is anything I've said political tonight? Am I lying to you? Am I trying to pull the wool over your eyes? This country is ready for truth. The truth sets us free. The truth resonates. On September 7th, it was my birthday. I was born on Labor Day, 1981. And Shannon, because I'm a little behind, I've got some things going on. I have around 20 people working for me in my company. But I haven't done my yard, I haven't done my hedges for a while. So Shannon buys me some Milwaukee power tools, and I'm out in the yard with Tim. And it's 9/11 by the time we get all these unpacked. The batteries are charged, we're ready, we're going, we're cutting. And I remember it's 9/11, and I said, I better tell Tim a little bit about a part of the life that he didn't see before his time. And I asked him, I said, Tim, do you know the story of John O'Neill? John O'Neill was an FBI agent who discovered Osama bin Laden. He discovered his plot against the World Trade Centers. And he went to the FBI and he said, would you give me the capability to stop this man? And sometimes the way the government works, because the people who work there are broken, they said, why don't you retire, John? Thanks for your service. But instead of going into retirement, living the good life and sitting out his sunset days, he went to work as head of World Trade Center security. And he died on 9/11, doing the things he believed that he could do, which was to stop this heinous attack. And you and I remember that. So I asked Tim, I said, Tim, what would John O'Neill say to us if he could come back? And he said, well, Dad, I think he'd say never give up, even if there's the smallest chance of success. That inspired me. We may have a small chance of success, but we're going to take it. George Washington had the smallest chance of success at Valley Forge, but he took it. George had a small chance of success at Trenton, but he succeeded. Gideon had a small chance of success against the Midianites, but he slimmed his team down to a small task force of 300 because that was good strategy. Our world is made of incredible miracles because of small chances of success. And as long as you're here, our chance of success is infinite. We will succeed because the Constitution rightly placed trust in you. This is the true story. This is your story. We're going to change America right now. We're going to do a turnaround, an about face, and we're going to move it back. But it's going to take all of us. And that is going to start this week. Are you ready? All right, so I'm going to put you to the test. And by the way, I did get done with my hedges. The opportunity to have you here tonight, I am immensely thankful for. I'm not a public speaker. I'm still knocking off the edges. Give me a minute. I'm going to get camped under. Is what I'm saying resonating? Do you support this? Is this what you want? Because if it is, I'm going to go and I'm going to fight hard for you. And I will not stop until we are at the convention and we have sealed the Republican nomination. So I'll put you to a test. Will you support this effort? If so, raise your hand right now. Okay. I think we got almost everybody in the room. For the holdouts, I'll come work on you later. Okay. All right. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I want to say thank you to you for honoring us by coming here and listening. We hear a lot of people talking. We don't hear a lot of people listening. And that's one of the things I've enjoyed about you since I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years. So thank you for listening. And thank you for inviting all of us, not just to listen, but to get involved. And there are a lot of elections, I think, in the last couple decades where you just kind of sit to the side, cynical, going, we can't make a difference. We have an opportunity right now to make a difference, every single one of us. And we can just sit back and let political machines grind through, candidates with speeches that were written for them 5 years ago. Or we can step up and talk about something special that is happening. So thank you for stepping up, David. Thank you. We bless you. And I'm so excited. Let's hear it one more time for David, Shannon, and his family.
For you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for your input.
Good. And once again, thanks for being here. We ask you to go forth and tell people about what you experienced.
Bless you all.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Have
Bye-bye.
a good evening.